Security dragged her off a plane in humiliation. But what happened next shook the entire airline industry. One woman's fight for dignity cost an airline $4 billion and changed everything forever. Don't just watch, be part of the change. Subscribe now for more shocking true justice stories that prove dignity always wins. The airport pulsed with energy, a living machine of bodies and machines moving in constant rhythm. Rolling suitcases clicked against tile floors. Children's laughter clashed with the drone of boarding announcements, and the smell of overpriced coffee lingered in the air. On this humid morning in Atlanta, tens of thousands of travelers wove through the concourse, each with their own mission, their own story, their own silent urgency to get somewhere. To most, it was just another morning. But for Maya Henderson, it would be the day everything changed. Maya walked with the unhurried grace of someone used to traveling often. She blended into the crowd in her tailored navy blue suit and polished flats. No gaudy jewelry, no designer handbag screaming for attention, just a sleek leather laptop case slung over her shoulder and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She looked like a professional, maybe a lawyer or consultant, the kind of passenger who'd already memorized the boarding process and didn't need to check the monitors every 5 steps. She moved with quiet confidence. Yet the weight she carried was invisible to everyone else. To them, she was just another woman flying from Atlanta to New York. What they couldn't know was that behind her calm expression was a financial strategist with more influence than entire corporations combined. Maya wasn't only respected in her field, she controlled billions. Entire industries listened when she spoke. Yet she had built her life around humility, never flashing her power. To strangers, she was simply another traveler. At gate C27, the boarding line was forming. Families with strollers fumbled with tickets. Businessmen tapped impatiently on phones. A college student clutched a neck pillow like a lifeline. The gate agent's voice rang out, "Now boarding group 2. Maya stepped forward, scanning her digital boarding pass. The agent smiled politely, scanning the code before waving her through. Everything was routine, ordinary, until she noticed the 2 security officers standing a few feet away. Their presence wasn't unusual. Airports often stationed guards during peak boarding times, but something about the way they stood, their stiff postures and eyes tracking the crowd, unsettled her. She brushed it off, adjusting the strap of her laptop bag as she entered the jet bridge. But as she neared the plane's door, a voice cut through the air. "Ma'am, hold up!" Maya froze, half turning. One of the officers, a tall man with a square jaw and a badge glinting under the fluorescent light, motioned her back. The other officer, shorter but equally stern, moved closer, boxing her in with unspoken authority. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked, her tone calm but firm. "We need you to step aside," the taller officer said flatly. She blinked. "Step aside? For what reason?" "Routine check," the second officer muttered, though his tone made it sound anything but routine. Passengers behind her shifted uneasily. A mother adjusted her child's stroller. A man in a baseball cap craned his neck to see what was happening. Another passenger quietly lifted his phone, the screen glowing as he began recording. Maya's heartbeat quickened, but outwardly she remained poised. She was no stranger to moments like this, moments where her presence alone, her skin, her quiet power, made others suspicious. She had dealt with it in boardrooms, at conferences, even in high-end restaurants. But here, at an airport with dozens of eyes watching, the humiliation stung sharper. "I have a valid boarding pass," she said evenly. "If there's an issue, I'd like to know what it is." The taller officer exchanged a look with his partner. "We've received a complaint," her brows knit together. "A complaint? From who? About what?" "That's not your concern," the second officer snapped, his voice rising just enough to draw more attention. A murmur rippled through the passengers. Someone whispered, "This doesn't look right." Another voice, "A woman's," said louder. "She didn't do anything." The tension thickened as phones rose higher. Passengers documenting every second. Maya inhaled deeply. Years of experience had taught her not to crack under pressure, not to give her critics the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. She stood taller, her voice measured and controlled. "Officers, I respect your work, But unless you can tell me the reason for this, I'd like to proceed to my seat." The taller officer stepped closer, his tone hardening. "Either you walk off this plane voluntarily or we remove you." "Those are your choices," gasps echoed in the jet bridge. A man muttered, "That's insane." The child in the stroller began to cry, startled by the raised voices. Maya's throat tightened. The humiliation wasn't just in the words. It was in the eyes on her, the whispers, the knowledge that every second was being captured on camera. She thought of all the moments in her life where she had fought to prove her worth, where she had been underestimated or dismissed. And now, here she was again, stripped of dignity in front of strangers. For a brief second, anger threatened to break through her calm. But she pushed it down. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her unravel. She adjusted the strap of her bag, straightened her back, and met the officer's gaze. "Very well," she said quietly. "If those are my only options, I'll go." Her voice was steady, but inside, her heart pounded like a drum. She turned, walking back down the jet bridge as passengers' eyes followed her. Some looked away in shame. Others whispered in disbelief. And more than a few recorded, their lenses capturing her quiet dignity in the face of injustice. By the time she reached the terminal, her humiliation was complete. The chatter grew louder around her. A few sympathetic claps echoed from strangers who seemed to recognize the injustice. But the sting remained. Her seat on the plane was gone, her dignity challenged, her humanity questioned. And yet beneath that calm exterior, something stirred. Because while the airline thought they had removed just another passenger, they had in fact ignited something much larger, something they could never have predicted. As Maya disappeared into the terminal crowd, the first videos hit social media. Within minutes, they began to spread, and by the time she reached a quiet corner to collect herself, millions of eyes were already watching. The video began its life like most viral clips do, grainy, shaky, captured on a smartphone by a passenger who couldn't believe what they were witnessing. A black woman, calm and composed, being cornered by two stern-faced officers in the narrow confines of a jet bridge. Her voice was firm, respectful, and steady as she asked a simple question: "Why am I being asked to step aside?" The officers gave no reason. Instead, they issued an ultimatum: walk off the plane or be dragged. The clip ended with her adjusting her bag, walking away with quiet dignity as whispers and gasps filled the air. Within 10 minutes of her leaving the gate, the first post went up on Twitter. "This just happened on my flight to NYC. Flying while black." The video was less than 2 minutes long, but it carried enough weight to spark outrage. By the time Maya had reached a quiet bench near a row of vending machines, the clip had already been retweeted over 1,000 times. Social media thrives on injustice. Outrage spreads faster than wildfire, and Maya's story had all the elements to ignite it. By the time she pulled out her phone to check her messages, her screen was already lighting up with texts. Friends, colleagues, even acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years were messaging her. "Maya, is this you? I just saw you on Twitter. Are you okay? This is blowing up. You're trending right now." She set her phone down for a moment, staring out the terminal windows at the planes taxiing on the runway. Her chest tightened with the sting of humiliation, but outwardly, she remained calm. Years of walking into boardrooms where she was the only black woman had prepared her for this, though no preparation ever truly made the sting fade. Meanwhile, the internet was turning her humiliation into a movement. Hashtags multiplied. There's justice for Maya. This airline racism. She deserved better. Influencers shared the clip with fiery captions. "Unbelievable, in 2025 we still see this happening. Powerful and calm in the face of racism. This woman is a queen. Airlines need to pay attention. We are not silent." News outlets picked it up within the hour. A local Atlanta station aired the footage, interviewing passengers who described what they'd seen. "She didn't raise her voice once," one traveler insisted. "She was polite, she was professional. They just decided she didn't belong on that flight." Another man added, "It was discrimination, plain and simple. Everyone saw it." By nightfall, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News were all running the video in endless loops. Pundits debated whether airlines had too much unchecked power. Civil rights leaders issued statements. Politicians chimed in on Twitter demanding accountability. The airline itself released a generic statement calling the incident under review, but it only added fuel to the fire. For Maya, the storm was surreal. She sat in her Manhattan apartment that evening, sipping chamomile tea while her television blared with debates about her life. Her face, which she had so carefully kept out of the public eye for years, was suddenly everywhere. She hadn't spoken to the press. She hadn't posted a word. And yet millions knew her name. Millions saw her humiliation replayed on loop. Her assistant, Carla, called her late that night. "Maya, this is insane. You're trending #1 worldwide. Do you want me to draft a statement? Or call a PR firm? Something?" Maya hesitated. She walked slowly across her living room, looking at the city lights twinkling outside her window. Finally, she said, "No, not yet." Carla stuttered. "But they're slandering the airline nonstop." "You could speak out, Maya. People want to hear from you." Maya shook her head, though Carla couldn't see it. "Sometimes silence is more powerful than noise. Let them talk. Let the truth reveal itself in its own time." And so she stayed silent. The silence only amplified the movement. Commentators speculated endlessly. Who is Maya Henderson? Some called her a victim, others a hero. Online forums dug into her past, trying to learn more. At first, they found little. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't an activist with a large online following. She was just a woman. And that made the injustice cut deeper, because it could have been anyone. The next morning, Maya went about her routine as if nothing had happened. She made her coffee, read her emails, and prepared her notes for the investment meeting she was scheduled to lead later that afternoon. But everywhere she turned, the world was screaming her name. The doorman at her building recognized her. "Saw you on TV, ma'am. Can't believe what they did. You handled it with such grace." At the cafe downstairs, the barista stared wide-eyed before whispering, "You're her, aren't you?" "The woman from the plane?" Maya offered polite smiles, but inside, a storm brewed. She had always valued her privacy. She had always avoided the spotlight. And now, the world had thrust her into it, painting her as both victim and symbol. That afternoon, as she walked into her firm's towering glass skyscraper, her colleagues' whispers followed her down the halls. Some gave her nods of respect. Others looked away awkwardly, unsure what to say. She ignored them all, heading straight to her office on the 42nd floor. As she settled into her chair, she finally pulled up the latest headlines. Airline faces backlash after removing Black woman from flight. Passenger speaks with dignity as security escalates. Viral video sparks national debate on discrimination. She closed her laptop slowly. Her fingers drummed against the mahogany desk. For hours, she sat in thought, watching the storm grow outside her window. And then came the revelation. She picked up the thick folder her assistant had left for her the day before. It was a portfolio breakdown of her firm's investments. She skimmed the pages absent-mindedly, tech companies, pharmaceutical stocks, energy firms, until her eyes froze on one line. Airline International Holdings, $4.07 billion in funding commitments. Her lips parted slightly as she stared at the words. Her mind raced. The very airline that had humiliated her, the very corporation now plastered across headlines for their arrogance, was tethered directly to her firm, to her. It was almost poetic. The same system that had tried to strip her of dignity was one she held in the palm of her hand. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. The humiliation of yesterday still lingered like a bruise, but now something else stirred inside her. Power, and with it, a choice. The world thought she was just another victim. But soon, they would learn the truth. because Maya Henderson was not powerless, and the airline that dared to humiliate her had no idea how much they had just endangered their future. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat on her balcony long after midnight, wrapped in a gray wool blanket, watching the restless city hum beneath her. Her tea had gone cold hours ago, but she hadn't noticed. The numbers kept circling in her mind like vultures. $4 billion. $4 billion in commitments, contracts, and leverage. Money that could keep an airline afloat or bring it crashing down. Her phone buzzed every 5 minutes. Journalists, politicians, friends, even strangers offering support or demanding her truth. She ignored them all. Instead, she stared at the skyline and thought about power. She thought about how, in that humiliating moment, standing on the jet bridge as passengers avoided her gaze, she had felt powerless, stripped, reduced to nothing more than a woman who had to obey. She thought about the officers' eyes, cold, dismissive, practiced in their certainty that she had no right to challenge them. And yet here she was, holding the pen that could rewrite the future of the very airline that had humiliated her. The irony was almost cruel, but cruelty had been her companion for years. She remembered walking into her first investment meeting at 25, fresh from Harvard, armed with brilliance and ambition, only to be asked if she was someone's assistant. She remembered the boardroom whispers, the patronizing smiles, the endless fight to prove that her presence was not charity, but earned. She had endured it all in silence, letting her results speak louder than her anger. Now, fate had handed her a weapon, and the question was, would she use it? The next morning, she walked into her office as if nothing had happened. Colleagues glanced up nervously, whispering as she passed. She placed her briefcase on the desk, smoothed her blazer, and opened her laptop. On the screen was a flood of news articles about her, the viral video still dominating every platform. Her assistant, Carla, poked her head into the office. "You've got calls stacked for the whole day. Investors, journalists, advocacy groups. Everyone wants a comment." Maya lifted her eyes. "Cancel them," Carla blinked. "Cancel all of them?" "Yes," Maya said firmly. "I don't need to comment." "Not yet," Carla hesitated. "Maya, with respect, silence might be read as weakness." Maya allowed herself a faint smile. "Or it might be read as strategy. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. I don't need to play their game." Carla nodded reluctantly, then left. Maya turned her attention back to the portfolio binder. She traced her finger along the page that tied her firm to Airline International Holdings. $4 billion. The airline's largest single private commitment. Without it, their upcoming expansion plans would collapse, their stock would plummet, their leadership would be exposed as reckless. The thought gave her chills. With one phone call, she could dismantle them. But a whisper of doubt crept in. Was that justice or vengeance? That evening, Maya attended a gala at the Metropolitan Museum, an event she couldn't avoid without raising suspicion. The room glittered with chandeliers and laughter, men in tuxedos and women in gowns sipping champagne as if the world outside didn't burn. Maya moved through the crowd with her usual grace, but she felt the stares. People knew. Her humiliation had made her famous, even here among the elite. A tall man with silver hair approached her. Leonard Dempsey, chairman of one of the airline's largest rival companies. His smile was thin, his eyes sharp. "Ms. Henderson," he said smoothly, "I must say, you've had quite a week." Maya returned a cool smile. "That's one way to put it." "I watched the footage myself," Leonard continued, his tone dripping with false sympathy. "Shameful. Utterly shameful. No respectable company should treat a woman, let alone a woman of your caliber, that way." Maya tilted her head. "Interesting choice of words." "Respectable," he chuckled. "Well, if you ever decide you're finished with that airline, there are opportunities elsewhere. My company, for instance, could benefit from an ally like you." Maya's eyes flickered with amusement. So that was his game. He wasn't here for sympathy. He was here for advantage. He saw her humiliation not as injustice, but as leverage. She excused herself politely, but his words lingered. Opportunities elsewhere. She didn't want to be someone's pawn. If she acted, it had to be on her own terms, not at the whim of rivals or opportunists. Back in her office the next morning, she made her decision. She summoned her closest circle: Carla, 2 senior partners, and her legal advisor. The mood in the room was tense as they sat around the sleek conference table. "I want options," Maya began, her voice steady. "If we withdraw our commitments from Airline International, what happens?" Her legal advisor leaned forward. "Their stock will nosedive. They've tied future expansion to your funding. Pull out now, and the market will smell blood. They might recover in time, but not without significant restructuring." One partner frowned. "Maya, that would cause waves across the industry. People will accuse you of acting emotionally." Maya's eyes narrowed. Emotionally or responsibly? They humiliated a paying passenger without cause. They exposed systemic issues in their culture. If this is how they treat individuals, what does it say about their governance? The room fell silent. Finally, Carla spoke softly. "Maya, if you do this, you won't just make a statement. You'll change the game." Forever, Maya sat back, folding her hands. Her face betrayed nothing, but inside her heart pounded with the weight of the choice. This wasn't just about her humiliation anymore. It was about power, accountability, and legacy. She rose from her chair and walked to the window, gazing out at the skyline. For a moment, the city felt small beneath her. "They thought they could strip me of dignity," she murmured. "But dignity isn't theirs to give or take. It's mine." And it's time they learned that her team exchanged uneasy glances. They knew what was coming. The storm that had begun with a shaky phone video was about to escalate into something far greater, something that would shake the foundations of an empire. Maya Henderson was done being silent. She was ready to strike. The call was short. Maya's voice was calm, her words measured, but they landed like detonations. On a Tuesday morning, as markets prepared to open, she picked up the phone and instructed her legal advisor to initiate the withdrawal of her firm's $407 billion commitment to Airline International Holdings. There was no hesitation, no stammer, no second-guessing. "Effective immediately," she said, her tone final. "Make sure it's airtight. I want no ambiguity, no loopholes." Her advisor's voice cracked on the other end. "Maya, this is unprecedented. You're about to destabilize one of the largest carriers in the world. Are you absolutely certain?" Maya's eyes hardened. "I was certain the moment they treated me as less than human. And with that, the fuse was lit. The markets felt it first. Airline International's stock opened at $122 per share. Within 20 minutes of Maya's firm's announcement, it had plummeted to $95. By noon, it was at $72. The ticker scrolled red across news stations worldwide. Breaking: Airline International faces crisis after $4 billion investment pulled. Stock in freefall as questions mount over airline's future. Reporters scrambled. Investors panicked. Passengers wondered if their booked flights were in jeopardy. Inside the airline's gleaming corporate headquarters, executives were in chaos. The CEO, Richard Fallon, slammed his fist against the boardroom table. "How the hell did this happen? $4 billion doesn't just vanish overnight." A nervous CFO cleared her throat. "It didn't vanish. It was pulled. And we all know by whom." Fallon's face reddened. "The woman from the video? She's behind this?" Another executive nodded grimly. "Maya Henderson. She's not just a passenger. She's one of the most powerful investment strategists in the world. Her firm has been our largest private backer for years." The room went silent. The weight of realization hung heavy. Fallon buried his face in his hands. He had dismissed her as just another inconvenient customer, someone to silence and move on from. But she hadn't moved on. She had struck back in a way no one could have imagined. The media devoured the story. News anchors spoke in reverent tones, almost in awe, as they recounted the chain of events. A black woman was humiliated on a flight. And now, in a stunning reversal of power, she has pulled $4 billion in funding, sending the airline into freefall. Talk shows debated her decision. Some hailed her as a hero of justice, a modern-day David striking Goliath with precision. Others criticized her for wielding her financial influence as a weapon. But regardless of the opinion, one fact was undeniable. Maya Henderson had changed the game. On social media, she became an icon overnight. Memes flooded the internet, pictures of her face captioned with phrases like, "mess around and find out," and 4 billion reasons not to underestimate a black woman. Hashtags exploded. Soccer Maya power, billion-dollar karma, or she pulled the plug, her silence. Once a source of speculation, was now seen as strategy. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't ranted. She had acted. And the action was louder than any words could have been. Meanwhile, Maya remained composed. She sat in her office, watching the coverage unfold on the muted television mounted on her wall. Her staff buzzed around her, fielding calls, drafting statements, negotiating fallout. But Maya herself sat still, serene, sipping her tea as if she were merely an observer in her own story. Carla rushed in, breathless. "Maya, the press is demanding a comment. They want to know if this was retaliation, if you plan to push for more action, if—" Maya raised a hand, silencing her. "Tell them this. We withdrew funding in alignment with our firm's values. We believe in accountability, integrity, and dignity. Where those values are not upheld, our money will not remain. That's all." Carla hesitated. "That's it? After everything?" Maya allowed herself a faint smile. "That's it. Simplicity is power. The more words you use, the more chances you give them to twist them." By the end of the week, Airline International was in full crisis mode. Their board issued apologies, pledging reforms, diversity training, and cultural overhauls. But the damage was done. Their competitors circled like sharks, ready to devour the wounded giant. For the first time in its 75-year history, the airline faced the real possibility of bankruptcy. Investors fled. Regulators loomed. Their empire, once untouchable, had been brought to its knees by a woman they had dismissed as insignificant, and the world knew it. But power is a double-edged sword. Not everyone cheered for Maya. Critics accused her of overreach. "This isn't justice," one pundit snarled on live television. "This is revenge disguised as morality. She's destabilizing thousands of jobs, millions of passengers, all because she had a personal grievance." Protests sparked outside her firm's headquarters. Airline employees, fearful for their livelihoods, carried signs reading, "We pay the price," and "Collateral damage isn't justice." Maya watched the coverage of the protest one evening, her jaw tight. She hadn't wanted to hurt innocent people. She hadn't wanted her actions to ripple this far. And yet, she reminded herself, it wasn't her hand that had set this chain in motion. It was the airline's arrogance. Still, the weight of power pressed heavy. She had pulled a lever most people never even touched, and the consequences were vast. She knew she had to navigate carefully. The phone rang late one night. An unfamiliar number. When she answered, a deep voice spoke. "Ms. Henderson, this is Richard Fallon." There was silence for a moment. Maya could hear his ragged breathing. He sounded tired, defeated. "You've made your point," he said finally. "The world sees us as villains. Our stock is collapsing. Investors are abandoning us. You've destroyed us." Maya's voice was calm. "No, Mr. Fallon, you destroyed yourselves. I simply stopped enabling you." He exhaled sharply, frustration leaking through. "What do you want from us? An apology? A seat at the table? Money? Tell me what it will take to undo this." Maya leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing. "It's not about what I want. It's about what you need to become. If your company can't survive without treating people with dignity, maybe it shouldn't survive at all." There was another long pause. Then Fallon whispered, almost broken, "You'll regret this." Maya ended the call without replying. Outside her window, the city pulsed with life. She stood there for a long time, staring at the skyline, knowing the battle wasn't over. The airline would fight back. The critics would grow louder. Her power had made her a target. But for the first time since that humiliating day on the plane, she felt whole again. She hadn't been silenced. She hadn't been erased. She had spoken in the only language corporations truly understood: money, and her voice had shaken the world. The storm she unleashed did not calm. It shifted. At first, the world had celebrated Maya as a symbol of unshakable dignity. The headlines called her the woman who brought an airline to its knees. But power is a dangerous crown, and the longer she wore it, the heavier it became. By the second week, the tone of coverage began to change. Yes, she was wronged, one TV pundit declared, pointing his finger at the camera. But let's not pretend her actions don't come with collateral damage. Tens of thousands of employees depend on that airline. Pilots, flight attendants, ground crew, ordinary working-class people. She's playing billionaire chess while real people lose their jobs. Another chimed in on a rival network. This isn't justice. This is vengeance. If every customer retaliated like this, industries would collapse. The narrative shifted like sand beneath her feet. She was no longer just a victim. She was a disruptor, a destabilizer, even a villain to some. The airline seized the moment. Their PR machine roared to life. Press conferences painted Maya as reckless, selfish, even unpatriotic. Richard Fallon, the CEO, gave a carefully staged interview, his voice heavy with practiced sorrow. "We failed Ms. Henderson on that day, and for that we have apologized repeatedly. But her retaliation, crippling our airline, risking the livelihoods of over 50,000 hardworking Americans, goes too far. This is no longer about dignity. This is about destruction." Clips of sobbing flight attendants, anxious mechanics, and desperate customer service agents played across screens. Hashtags emerged. "The job's over vengeance, and we're the collateral." For the first time, Maya felt the ground shifting beneath her. Her office became a fortress of strategy. Advisors debated late into the night, papers strewn across the polished table. Some urged her to double down. Never show weakness. Stay silent. Let the company collapse under its own rot. Others advised compromise. Negotiate terms. Force reforms. Make them rebuild from the ashes, but keep the people employed. Carla, her most trusted confidant, was the only one who spoke directly to her heart. "Maya," she said quietly one evening, "I know what they did was wrong. I know they deserve consequences, but I also know you don't want innocent people to pay the price. That's not who you are." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she poured herself another cup of tea. Her mind replayed images of employees holding signs outside her firm. "My kids need me employed." "Punish the bosses, not us," she whispered, more to herself than to Carla. "I wanted justice, not this." But Richard Fallon wasn't finished. Behind the scenes, his lawyers drafted lawsuits, accusing Maya of intentionally manipulating the market. Lobbyists whispered in government ears, framing her as a dangerous monopolist who wielded too much unchecked power. Anonymous op-eds appeared in major newspapers, painting her as arrogant, disconnected, out of touch with real people. And then came the leak. A private email from years earlier surfaced, in which Maya had written about her frustrations with corporate America's hypocrisy. Her words, meant for a trusted colleague, were taken out of context and plastered across headlines. Sometimes I wonder if these companies even deserve saving. The airline's allies pounced. "See?" commentators cried. "She's admitted it herself. She doesn't care about companies or workers. She's driven by ego. The smear campaign worked." Her once spotless reputation was suddenly muddied. Investors grew nervous. Clients began questioning whether her judgment was clouded. For the first time, Maya felt truly isolated. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered the empty streets near her penthouse. The city was quieter at 2 a.m., the usual chaos muted to a hum. She found herself at a small diner, slipping into a booth in the back, unnoticed. The waitress, a weary woman in her 50s, poured her coffee without recognition. Two men at the counter chatted about the news. Crazy, huh? That woman just tanked an airline. I mean, I get it, but man, my brother's a baggage handler. He's terrified he'll be laid off. The other man shrugged. Yeah, but don't forget why she did it. If they treated her that way, how many others got treated the same without the power to fight back? At least she made them pay. Maya sipped her coffee silently, her heart heavy. In those men's words, she heard the truth. She was both hero and villain, depending on whose life was touched by her actions. Back at her office the next day, she stood before her team. For hours, she listened as they debated strategies. But in the end, she raised her hand and silenced them. "I didn't start this war," she said firmly. "But I'm in it now. If they think they can smear me into submission, they're mistaken. We are not backing down." But she paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "We will find a way to protect the workers. This isn't about destruction. It's about transformation." Her words landed with the weight of both command and compassion. Her team leaned forward, waiting for direction. "We're going to build something better out of this mess," Maya continued. "Not just punishment. Change. Real change." And with that, a new resolve sparked within her. But the battle lines had been drawn. Richard Fallon was desperate, cornered, and dangerous. His company was unraveling, and he would do whatever it took to drag Maya down with him. Lawsuits, smears, political pressure, and Maya knew this was no longer about a plane or a single humiliation. It was about a fight for the soul of corporate America, who held the power, and whether dignity could ever outweigh dollars. The war was only beginning. Maya had always believed silence could be her sharpest weapon. But now silence had been twisted into weakness, her dignity distorted into arrogance. The smear campaigns were relentless, the lawsuits multiplying, the media's narrative shifting further each day. It was time to speak. She didn't choose a glossy press conference or a TV interview. Instead, she chose a stage that corporations feared most: the people. At dawn, she sat with Carla and a videographer in her office. The city's skyline gleamed in the background as Maya, dressed simply in a navy blazer and white blouse, addressed the camera directly. Her voice was calm but firm, her gaze unflinching. "I did not withdraw funding out of vengeance," she began. "I withdrew it because dignity is not negotiable. I will not allow billions of dollars to support a company that treats people as disposable. This is bigger than me. This is about every passenger humiliated, every worker silenced, every voice dismissed. If a company can't thrive without basic respect, then perhaps it shouldn't thrive at all." She paused, letting the silence speak as loudly as her words. "But this is not the end. To the workers afraid for their jobs, I hear you. I see you. I will fight to protect you, even as I demand accountability from those at the top. This is not destruction. This is transformation. And transformation always begins with disruption." The video was under 5 minutes long. By noon, it had been viewed 60 million times. The tide began to shift again. For the first time since the backlash began, the public saw Maya not as a destroyer, but as a visionary. Her words resonated because they weren't abstract. They were rooted in justice and compassion. She wasn't dismantling for the sake of ego. She was dismantling to rebuild. Civil rights organizations rallied behind her. Influential CEOs of rival airlines and transportation companies discreetly reached out, offering alliances. Even politicians, once hesitant, began to echo her language. The hashtags changed. Liram transform, not destroy. Sipe Maya for change. Dignity is non-negotiable. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a foothold. Still, Fallon was not finished. In a smoky boardroom in Dallas, surrounded by exhausted executives and furious investors, he slammed his hand against the table. "She thinks she's some savior. She's nothing but a tyrant in designer heels, and I won't let her destroy us." His legal counsel whispered cautiously, "Sir, public opinion is shifting." Her video, "I don't care about public opinion," Fallon roared. "We fight harder. We dig deeper. If she wants war, then she'll get war." He leaned forward, eyes blazing. "Find her weaknesses. Every deal she's made, every decision. I want dirt. And if there isn't any dirt, then find a way to make her bleed anyway." Back in Manhattan, Maya convened her own war council. Around the long oak table sat allies from unexpected places, leaders of labor unions, advocacy groups, a handful of rival airline executives, and a few politicians who had quietly supported her from the shadows. The room buzzed with urgency. "We can't just let Fallon control the narrative," one union leader said. "Workers are scared, and he's using their fear against you." "We need guarantees," Maya nodded. "Then let's give them guarantees. I'm willing to establish a transitional fund, something to support workers through the instability. We'll make it clear this isn't about punishing them." A rival airline CEO smirked. "And while you're at it, perhaps you'll consider shifting those billions toward friendlier skies?" Maya gave him a sharp look. "This isn't about handing power from one broken system to another. If I move funds, it will be toward a company that commits to transformation, not exploitation." Her tone silenced the room. Carla leaned in and whispered, "Maya, you're not just fighting Fallon anymore. You're fighting the very way these companies operate." Maya exhaled slowly. "Then so be it. Someone has to." That evening, she returned to her apartment and stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker like fireflies. Her phone buzzed again, an anonymous message this time. "Back off, or we ruin you." She stared at the words, her pulse quickening. Fallon's threats had moved from corporate to personal. The battlefield was shifting. Carla urged her to call security, to tighten her circle, to avoid public appearances. But Maya only shook her head. "I won't live in fear," she said. "If they want to fight, they'll get one. But it will be on my terms." Days later, she appeared not at a corporate gala or a news studio, but at a rally in Queens organized by airline workers themselves. Thousands packed into the square, holding signs, chanting, demanding answers. The crowd fell silent as Maya stepped onto the stage. "I didn't come here as an investor today," she told them, her voice rising over the hum of the city. "I came here as a woman who was humiliated, as a passenger who was dismissed, and as a human being who refuses to let arrogance win. I pulled $4 billion because dignity matters. But hear me now, I will not abandon you. I will fight for your jobs, your rights, your dignity, even as I hold your leaders accountable. We are not enemies. We are allies. And together, we will build something better than what they gave us." The roar of the crowd was deafening. Fallon, watching the broadcast from his office, threw his glass against the wall. "She's turning them against me," he shouted. His advisors exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, it wasn't just Maya's billions threatening him. It was the people, and so the stage was set. Fallon, desperate and ruthless, with everything to lose. Maya, resolute and fearless, with everything to prove. The war had moved beyond balance sheets and court filings. It was now a battle for hearts, minds, and the future of an entire industry. And Maya knew the next move had to be decisive. The storm was no longer brewing. It had arrived. Fallon's empire teetered like a skyscraper with cracks in its foundation. Lawsuits piled on, workers threatened strikes, and investors whispered of betrayal. Yet Fallon himself remained defiant, clutching power with white-knuckled fists. Maya, on the other hand, stood taller than ever. Her rallies drew tens of thousands, her speeches went viral, and her message of dignity had transformed into a movement. But she knew the battle wasn't won until Fallon himself was forced to face accountability. The final confrontation came not in a courtroom, nor in a secretive boardroom, but in the blinding spotlight of Congress. The hearing room was packed. Cameras lined every angle, journalists filled the aisles, and millions watched live as Fallon and Maya sat across from each other at the long mahogany table. Fallon wore his trademark grin, though his eyes betrayed the fatigue of a man unraveling. Maya, by contrast, radiated calm authority, her navy suit immaculate, her posture unshakable. The committee chair began. "Today we address allegations of corporate misconduct, worker exploitation, and retaliatory campaigns led by Fallon Air and its affiliates. Both parties will speak." Fallon leaned into the microphone first. His voice dripped with rehearsed charm. "Let me be clear. I've dedicated my life to building this airline into a global leader. And now, one disgruntled investor, an opportunist, has tried to tear it all down out of spite. She calls it dignity, I call it sabotage. Gasps rippled through the room. Fallon smirked, satisfied. Maya didn't flinch. When her turn came, she spoke with measured precision. I was not just an investor, she began. I was a passenger, humiliated in front of hundreds for the color of my skin. And when I demanded accountability, I was met with arrogance and dismissal. That is not leadership. That is tyranny disguised as business. She turned slightly, addressing the committee but ensuring the cameras caught every word. This isn't about me versus Fallon. This is about every worker silenced when they spoke of safety concerns. Every mother stranded because customer service treated her like a nuisance. Every black woman who's been told, in words or in silence, that her dignity doesn't matter. If leadership cannot recognize humanity, then it doesn't deserve leadership. The room erupted in applause, rare in such hearings, but unstoppable. Fallon's mask cracked. He slammed his hand on the table. She's lying. This is all lies! But in that instant, one of his own former executives stood up in the audience. A woman with silver hair, trembling but resolute, raised her voice. She's not lying, the woman declared. I worked under Fallon for 20 years. I saw what he did to workers, to whistleblowers. I saw how he silenced complaints, how he mocked passengers behind closed doors. She is telling the truth. The cameras swiveled. The room buzzed, and then another voice joined. A flight attendant in uniform, then a mechanic, then a pilot. One by one they stood, testifying not with documents, but with their presence, their courage, their stories. Fallon's empire collapsed in real time, not through financial loss, but through the unmasking of truth. In the weeks that followed, Fallon was forced to resign under federal investigation. His airline, stripped of leadership, scrambled for restructuring. Investors fled, stock prices plummeted, and regulators finally stepped in. Maya could have claimed victory and walked away. But she didn't. Instead, she redirected the $4 billion she had once pulled into a bold new venture, a consortium of airlines and transit companies bound by one principle: dignity first. Worker protections were written into contracts. Customer accountability was tracked transparently. Diversity wasn't a slogan. It was built into leadership pipelines. She called it the Horizon Initiative. It wasn't easy. Rivals scoffed, critics doubted, and the press questioned her stamina. But slowly, flights under Horizon-affiliated airlines became synonymous with fairness, respect, and reliability. Customers noticed. Workers noticed. The world noticed. Months later, Maya stood once again in an airport terminal, not as a passenger fearing humiliation, but as a leader unveiling a new chapter. Reporters crowded in, microphones extended, lights flashing. "Ms. Johnson," one called out, "do you feel vindicated now that Fallon has fallen?" Maya paused, then shook her head. This was never about vindication. Fallon was one man. This was about a system, and systems don't change because one man falls. They change because people demand better, and keep demanding it. She looked around at the workers standing behind her. Flight attendants, mechanics, and executives alike. I didn't pull $4 billion to destroy. I pulled it to rebuild. And today we take flight on something new. Not just an airline, but a promise. A promise that dignity will never again be negotiable. The crowd erupted, not in applause, but in something deeper. Hope. That night, as she sat alone in her office, Maya gazed at the city lights once more. The war had cost her dearly, sleepless nights, relentless attacks, endless risks. But she had won something more valuable than money, a legacy. Her phone buzzed. It was Carla sending a single line of text. "They'll write books about this one day." Maya smiled faintly. She didn't need books. She didn't need monuments. The change itself was enough. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet wash over her. For the first time in months, she felt peace. The woman once dragged off a plane in humiliation had grounded an empire and built something greater from its ashes. And somewhere, far above the clouds, millions of passengers traveled with a little more dignity because one woman refused to stay silent.